An OAuth grant is a credential representing the resource owner's authorization. More often than not, we tend to think of grants in terms of the process used to obtain an access token. As covered in the OAuth introduction earlier, there are 4 different grant types. And in this session, we are going to talk about the resource owner password credentials grant type. This grant type is particularly used when the resources are owned by a particular user and the requesting application is trusted. For example, a native app could use this grant type to log into a mobile app or a desktop app. The various actors involved in this grant are user, who is the resource owner, client, which is the application making requests on behalf of the resource owner and with its authorization, Apigee Edge, which is the authorization server to generate and validate the access tokens, authentication server to validate the user credentials, and the resource server that is hosting the protected resources. The resource owner password credentials, that is the username and password, can be used directly as an authorization grant to obtain an access token. This credential should only be used when there's a high degree of trust between the resource owner and the client and when other authorization grant types are not available. It is similar to the client credentials grant type, but with an extra step to validate the user credentials along with the client credentials. However, this grant type is more secure and complex than the client credentials grant type. It is also used to migrate existing clients using direct authentication schemes such as HTTP Basic Auth or Digest Auth to OAuth by converting the stored credentials to an access token. And it generates refresh token along with the access token. In the token flow, the user provides the resource server credentials, which is the username and password, to the client app, which is sent to Apigee Edge along with the client credentials. Apigee Edge first validates the client credentials, and since Apigee Edge does not validate user credentials, an authentication service is used. An authentication server validates the credentials, and if they are valid, Apigee Edge proceeds to generate an access token and returns it to the client. This is an example of the OAuth policy that uses the generate access token operation to generate an access token for a password grant. While comparing the response between the resource owner password credentials grant and client credentials grant, we can see that the resource owner password grant response has additional attributes for refresh token along with the access token attributes. Now, to get a protected resource, the client should pass the request along with the access token. Apigee Edge will verify the access token, and if the token is valid, Apigee will send the request to the resource server, which is the target server. And once Apigee Edge gets the response, it sends it back to the client. You can set the access token as the bearer token in the authorization header of the HTTP request or pass it as a query parameter. In this example, we are passing the token using the header. The verify access token operation of the OAuth policy is used to validate the access token. This policy will return errors if the token is invalid or expired. For more information and samples on this very particular topic, refer to our documentation, and if you have any questions, please post them on our community. Thanks for watching.